Hi everyone. Hopefully you've already taken a look at our speaker positioning video, the video that guides you through the setup of where to physically put your home theater speakers. If not, you can click on this link or visit our YouTube channel to find it and other great videos. For this video, we're going to explain the importance of setting crossover, distance, and level for your speakers. We'll also discuss the equalization or EQ features of modern AV receivers. There are two ways to make these adjustments: using an auto calibration system or manually. If you have a modern AV receiver, it probably came with a little microphone that's supposed to automatically adjust all of these settings. By plugging it in and following the instructions in the user's manual, the receiver will recommend a crossover setting, automatically compensate for distance, and adjust the level of individual speakers. More advanced receivers may also apply automatic EQ like Odyssey or Yamaha's YPAO to speakers and subwoofers in an attempt to make them sound as similar and accurate as possible. For best results, the microphone should be placed on a tripod in the main seating location, away from any surfaces, and you should step out of the room while the system is running. If you have an older receiver, one without an automatic setup system, you'll need a tape measure for distance and an SPL or sound pressure level meter for volume level. There are SPL meter applications that you can download for a smartphone, and these will work, but they will likely be less accurate than a consumer level SPL meter like the Galaxy Audio CM130, especially with subwoofers. Even if your receiver does have an auto setup system, we recommend that you start with the auto setup and then do a common sense double check of each setting. First, in most cases, you should have all speakers set to small, not large. When set to large, a speaker plays all frequencies, even low bass that is usually best reserved for the subwoofers. If you don't have a subwoofer, or if your speaker has a built-in subwoofer, then you can use the large setting for the main front, left, and right channels. Second, the crossover. This is the point at which low frequencies are redirected to your subwoofer instead of your other speakers. 80 Hz is a commonly recommended crossover setting because this is the generally accepted point at which it becomes difficult for humans to localize a sound. However, it takes a big driver, or lots of smaller drivers, to produce big bass. If your speakers are not able to reproduce frequencies down to 80 Hz at the listening level, you may need to raise the frequency at which the crossover operates. Your crossover should be set no lower than the lowest manufacturer's rated speaker response at plus or minus 3 decibels. You can find this in your user's manual or on the manufacturer's website. If you can't find this specification anywhere, measure the diameter of the largest driver in your speaker. For a 6-inch or larger driver, use 80 Hz. For 4 to 6 inches, use 100 or 120 Hz, and for a driver smaller than 4 inches, use 150 or 200 Hz. The distance of your speakers relative to one another is important. This is because it takes time for the sound to get from the speaker to your ears. It is not much time, but it does still take time. With 2 or more speakers playing sound designed to get to your ears at the same time, if one speaker is farther away than the other, even by a little bit, it will take longer for the sound to arrive. This will result in a smeared sound, making short, intense sounds like a gunshot or whip crack less detailed and speech harder to understand. Don't worry if you can't absolutely get all your speakers the same physical distance from one another. Most of us can't. And you can adjust for this in your receiver. For distance, simply measure the distance from each speaker's tweeter to your nose and then follow the instructions in your receiver's manual for setting individual speaker distance. One note: the distance of your powered subwoofer may have been identified by your automatic setup as being further away than it physically is. This is to compensate for what's called phase matching with your other speakers. Even if the physical distance is closer than the setup microphone identified, it is not advisable to change the subwoofer distance unless something really doesn't sound right. You will also want the volume level of your individual speakers to be equal. A number of things can make one speaker louder than another. It might be designed to be more sensitive, which means it will play louder than a speaker with a lower sensitivity when both speakers are given the same amount of power. Also, placing a speaker in a corner or near a wall can make some frequencies louder, as can placing a speaker closer to a listener. For level, you need to play a wideband pink noise test tone, which may be built into your receiver, or which you can download in a WAV file from a number of sources by doing an internet search for pink noise download. First, set up your SPL meter. If your SPL meter offers speed, compensation, or range adjustment, use these settings: slow speed, C-weighted, and a range that encompasses 75 dB or decibels. Set the tip of the microphone at the point where your ears would be, aim it up slightly towards the intersection of your front wall and ceiling. Play the test tones through each speaker, one at a time, and set the level of each speaker so that it reads approximately 75 decibels on the meter. You may need to increase the master volume level of your receiver in order to reach 75 decibels. Try not to make all the individual speaker adjustments by only boosting or cutting. For example, instead of setting just your center channel to plus 10 dB, set it to plus 5 dB and each of your other speakers to negative 5 dB, keeping them in the middle of their adjustment range. Some listeners also prefer to boost the center channel level by 1 to 2 dB to make movie dialogue a little easier to hear amongst all the blockbuster action. Whether you determine your levels with the auto setup or by hand, write down your initial settings before making any changes. This way, you can experiment and still be able to go back to your original settings if you don't like the results. Writing down settings will also save you frustration if a guest or a child accidentally changes your settings. In fact, some receivers offer the option of locking the settings menu to prevent such a disaster. Lastly, different speaker models or the same speaker model at different positions in the room may have a different tonal response. By applying equalization to the individual speakers, you can make them sound more similar to one another, helping them to blend together. Just be careful not to get too carried away with your EQ. It's easy to boost certain frequencies which may sound good on some material, but not on others. Also, it's possible to damage drivers if too much gain is added to certain frequencies. When it comes to EQ, auto or manual, trust your ears. Listen to familiar material when switching the EQ on and off, and if you don't like the results, leave it off. You're almost done, but there are a few last considerations. First, you may notice that your receiver has different sound modes called DSPs, possibly labeled music or movie, and these can drastically alter the sound of your system and should be used wisely. You might even have a nighttime listening mode. Every receiver is different, so read through your manual to see what differences these DSPs offer. Second, most new receivers have a power on volume you can set, so every time you turn on the receiver, it's at the same volume level. This means that you never have to worry about turning on your system and getting blown out of your house. Third, have a read through your manual to become familiar with the receiver. Oftentimes, there are settings buried in the menu that can dramatically affect sound quality, but you need to read the manual to find out what they are. By following these steps, you will have set up your receiver to perform at its best, and you'll be rewarded with a more realistic, theater-like sound. For more guides and tips on getting the most out of your system, along with news and reviews of the latest equipment, be sure to visit Audioholics.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Google+, and like us on Facebook.